I have a little bit of student loan debt, and I hadn't really thought about like the car and, credit cards and all those other things until I saw the Credit Karma report. And I was just like, and I went to my parents and I was just like, because I was at their house at the time. And I went to them and I was like, I'm going to be poor like for the rest of my life.
All right, everybody, this is Dominique Henderson, the YouTube CFP, chilling out on a Friday. And I have a very, very special guest, Miss Shana Green from the Wealth Vibe, visiting us, joining us all the way from the ATL. What is up, Shana?
Hey, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Happy to get the conversation going.
Yeah. This has been cool. This is this has been a little I don't know. It's kind of been in the making, right? We met on social media, and been trying to get you on. So I'm really happy for the conversation, and I hope that it's going to help everybody, because I think a lot of what you talk about on your channel and when I talk about dovetails together with that financial literacy, economic empowerment, personal development. So really anxious to get your thoughts, and thank you for being for visiting today.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So just a little housekeeping. So wherever you're watching from, if you're on the live, hello, please pop in, tell us who you are, where you're watching from. And what Shana are going to try to do in this conversation is attempt to work your questions into our conversation. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. If anybody's still around to ask some of those debt-free journey questions. And we'll also have this available on my channel as well as Shana, because on this debt-free journey, which I think is so important when we're living in today's society, we definitely want to get some of her strategies and techniques. So we are ready to roll. Shana, I don't know where to start. Like, tell us your story, because you've got a 6-figure debt story that you're working down and making like tremendous progress. But even before we get there, just tell us a little bit about Shana and a little bit about your story.
A little bit about Shana. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was born. Well, no, I was born in Miami, Florida, and that's where I was raised. And then I went off to college at Howard University and did my degree there. I had a Bill and Melinda Gates scholarship when I went to school there. And so the really great thing about the Gates scholarship, as a lot of people know of it, that scholarship paid for up to 10 years of education. So for undergrad, it would pay up to 5 years of undergrad. And then if you went into one of the qualifying programs, public health being one of them, they would pay for grad school for you as well. But then when I was in my junior year or so, they changed the rules. And so before, they used to pay for anything, any degree for undergrad, however much it costs. And then within those 6 fields for grad school, they would pay for however much it costs to go to whatever school you selected to go to. But then in my junior year, they decided to put a cap on it. And so they had a cap for undergrad programs and also graduate programs. And I decided that I wanted to go into public health. Before then, I considered a career in medicine. But after doing like a program one summer, I decided that medicine isn't really what I wanted to do, and public health was more aligning with like what I was interested in. And so I was like, okay, let me go get this master's of public health degree and then get my PhD. I had already mapped out what I wanted to do. And I was like, this is great. Gates pays for it all. And then, like I said, they changed it, but I was like, well, I don't have any debt. So I'll just take out student loans now, because everybody else I know already has student loans for 4 years of school. I'm going into 2 years of school. It's not that big of a deal. They're going to pay for some of it. I can take out some debt. So I went to Columbia University.
Okay, so pause real quick. So this is after undergrad. This is going into your graduate degree studies.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, so I went to Columbia University for my master's of public health degree. And I think at the time the cap for Gates was like $35,000. And I honestly don't know how much Columbia costs per year at that time, but I believe the $35,000 covered all of my tuition. However, I needed to live. And at that time, I was graduating in the recession. And so I also found it pretty difficult to find jobs being like a new graduate. And I'm sure a lot of other people who had work experience also had a tough time finding jobs then as well. And a lot of people were just getting let go from their jobs because people weren't hiring and they couldn't afford to keep people on. So I just needed to live. And so I took out student loans. I took out, I think, $17,000 my first year at Columbia, and then probably the same amount the next year. And I figured it's not that big of a deal. And I kind of, I guess, relied on this thing that one of my high school teachers, there was this program that we were in called Power Society. It was supposed to prepare us for college. And he always said, you know, the biggest investment or the best investment that you can make is in yourself and in your education. And a lot of us don't think twice about buying a car, but you think twice about how much you're going to spend for school when, you know, no one can take that away from you. No one can take away your education. And so I always had this imagery of like, okay, well, if I can spend money on a Corolla, I can spend money on school. So these little bit of school, in my mind, these little bit of school student loans, that's not a big deal, you know, like, so.
So wait a minute, way to unpack that. I want to unpack that for a second, because that is, that was, let's just call it a faulty mindset. Obviously, you know, at this point, you have realized that, but like, I wonder just how much that anybody watching this, you know, where they kind of, because, you know, I get into these talks, I gave one about 2 months ago, this whole notion around good and bad debt, right? Mm-hmm. So is education debt a good debt or bad debt? What would you say to that? To that question?
Ooh, that's still, I still don't even know, right? I think that, because I think that obviously I had to, well, I could have made different choices, right? I could have decided not to go to Columbia. I could have, in order to be, you know, in my career where I want to do what I want to do, like I need a PhD to do that. And so I had to, and for public health, you tend to need a master's and then get into a PhD. You can't just skip over the master's, you know. And so I could have chosen to go somewhere else for my master's degree, somewhere that was within the cap for Gates, but I also feel like I received a really good education that opened the door for me to get into PhD program. Not to say that you can't, but I think that it wasn't like the worst decision. If I took out student loans, I think I should have just been smarter about how I handled them if I had taken them out, or when I did take them out, because I did.
No, I feel that. I think, you know, one of the main arguments around student loans being what I would call bad debt, if you want to, you know, kind of connotate it that way, is that, you know, what are you going to be taking out? And what is it going to, so what is it going to be costing you to go to school? And what are you going to be taking out to supplement that cost versus what do you think you're going to be able to make? Because the way I look at it is, you know, bad debt is basically anything that's going to be less worth than worth less than what you paid for it. So like a car is a good example that it's never going to be worth more than you pay for it. And so you got to be thinking about that when it comes to your net worth. Okay, so did you go live in New York for Columbia, or where were you at around this time?
Yeah, I lived in New York City and Harlem.
Okay,
the whole 2 years. That's all I could have smarter about. Yeah. So at the time, like my rent was $13.95 for a one bedroom apartment in New York City. I chose to live by myself in New York City, and I probably should have gotten a roommate. But also, I didn't really know anybody aside from my boyfriend who was living there at the time. Well, my ex-boyfriend, just to clarify. But yeah, he was living there, but I wasn't going to move in with him, and I didn't know anybody else to live with. So I think it's kind of difficult. I kind of admire people who like move to new cities and then just randomly find a roommate. I'm like, how do you do that? But I chose to live in a one bedroom apartment. I probably could have done it differently.
Gotcha. So fast forward a little bit. So you finished the doctorate program or whenever. When did you? I think on your channel, I remember you saying $108,000 of student loan debt, which makes a lot of sense. I'm gonna throw this statistic out at you, which you probably already know. But so the math is there's about 16 million people in college right now. And as of last quarter, there was like $1.6 trillion in outstanding student loan debt, which is basically 6 figures per person. That's the average. So like, when did you have the, oh crap moment? Like I got like a lot of debt. When did that happen?
So just to clarify, I did not have $108,000 of student loan debt.
Okay, cool.
$108,000 of debt. I have about $55,000 of student loan debt, and that's all the debt that I have right now. And that's pretty much the debt that I amassed from student loans, in addition to interest, because I didn't pay any interest since I graduated from Columbia. I took out 2 small loans while I was in my doctorate program for like somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000 each. And so that added onto it as well. So my total, I would say the total principal that I probably took out was maybe like $40,000 across the master's and the PhD program. And what was your question again?
Well, my question was, when did you have the aha moment about, okay, I'm going to start tackling this student loan debt or not? Like, I am in like 6 figures of debt would overwhelm most people. I don't know. Maybe you can kind of unpack the emotions of, I don't know if it was like a gradual thing or if it's like one day you kind of looked up and like you were doing a budget and you were like, what the heck is going on here? Like, I'm trying to figure out what emotion you felt around that, and maybe somebody's out there that identifies with that particular notion and felt, kind of overwhelmed. So when did you realize that?
Yeah, so when I was in the doctoral program, that's when I started to realize like I'm in trouble, because and it wasn't even anything to do with the school or with student loans itself. I think I had a car at the time that was giving me issues and I wanted to get rid of it. And it was on my Credit Karma report as, a debt that I had. And then I was trying to figure out, okay, how can I pay off the loan that's on this car and, come out okay with it. And then I was looking through my Credit Karma report and it was like, you have $70-something thousand of debt. And I literally started crying.
Wow.
I was like, how am I going to like get from under this? Like, how do you pay that much debt? And so like I started crying, but that was in the doctoral program. And you would think that like I would make changes, but I knew at that point, because I think before that I was just like, oh, I have a little bit of student loan debt, and I hadn't really thought about like the car and, credit cards and all those other things until I saw the Credit Karma report. And I was just like, and I went to my parents and I was just like, because I was at their house at the time, and I went to them and I was like, I'm going to be poor like for the rest of my life. And I was like so devastated. Yeah, it was just that was the first time that I realized it. And then I think it kind of stayed in the back of my mind, like something that I wanted to do, but I felt like I wasn't making enough money to actually do something about it. And then at the same time was like adding debt to it. But it wasn't until I graduated and I was like, okay, I have this postdoc. I'm going to be making like $70,000 a year. I should be able to make some progress. And I'm moving to a new city. I don't have any friends, so nobody can hold me back. So I could just, make as much money as I need to. And I started to prepare myself. When I graduated, I had like a month. Yeah, a month from when I actually walked across the stage to, well, actually it was a little bit over a month, like maybe like 7 weeks before I actually moved to Atlanta. And then so I started reading books about personal finance. I read Your Money Life in Your 30s by Peter Dunn. And that's a book that I really like because that helped me with figuring out what the budget needed to be for me. And then I also read You're Badass at Making Money. And that book is more so about like your mindset towards like making money and having money and accumulating wealth and those types of things. And I think I also read Broke Millennial. Yeah, I did. Broke Millennial. So I read like all those books and I was like ready to like get that first paycheck. And the funny thing is a lot of people say like they laugh at people who plan out what they're gonna do with money before they get it. But like that's exactly what I did. Like I started, but like I was like, okay, this is how much this the rent's gonna be. This is how much this should be. This is how before I ever got the first paycheck, and my first paycheck didn't come until October 2017, the last day of October, because I would get paid the last day of every month. So I was planning out well before.
So let me so let's catch everybody up. So if you're just tuning in or you're watching the replay, we got Shana Green from the Wealth Vibe giving us her debt-free journey, and we're unpacking a lot of nuggets. Something I want to go back to what you said is you said you went to Credit Karma. I don't want to assume that anybody watching this is going to know what Credit Karma, but it is a free app that gives you 2 of your 3 credit reports in the form of scores. So you can like go get that and see where you are like right now, like within 5 minutes. So that's something that I think everybody should know of. I want to know, this is what I want to know. I want to know when you had that, and I don't even know if that was your most frustrating moment during your journey, but when you had that aha, you cried, you know, you're at your parents, like you're like, and then you said you didn't even make changes immediately, but then you start going into how you made changes. You read these books, like what started the idea around, I'm going to go on a debt-free journey and then I'm going to document it? Because that's essentially what your YouTube channel is about. Like when was that change?
So just to clarify, that moment that I had, I don't recall what year it was, but there were years between like that moment where I was like crying, looking at Credit Karma, and the point at which I actually started to make changes. So it probably was maybe like 2 years at minimum, maybe even 3 years between that.
Oh, wait, hold on then. Okay, that's a low lot right there. So so you just kept this lifestyle, you kept the behavior up, and like you didn't do anything about it. You weren't budgeting. You were just continue to, you know, what add on to the debt, or like what? Tell me what that looked like.
So I didn't necessarily add on to the debt in terms of well, I don't know. I can't, you know, like this is some long ago and I wasn't really, you know, documenting at that time. But I don't think I was like, I know I wasn't budgeting for sure, but I know in my mind I was thinking like I didn't make enough money to do anything about it. And also I think too, when you think about student loans and they don't require you to pay on anything until like you're out of school, I was just like, okay, whatever. I do know that I got rid of that car. I was able to, you know, pay that car off. And then, but then maybe in 2016, I ended up buying a brand new Honda Civic, which I have now, which I recently just paid off. So I did end up like paying off one car and getting another car before my debt-free journey even started. So, you know, like, if I were thinking about like, okay, debt-free journey, you need to do better, I probably wouldn't have purchased the car at that time. But yeah, I didn't budget. And also one thing about Credit Karma that I'll say too is like, I think the value in Credit Karma for me is like getting a full idea of your financial picture in a sense, because it does have like your, you know, how much you owe to people. And it's not necessarily about your credit score that I go to it for, because my credit score was good back then. Like, so that wasn't an issue for me. It was about looking at the debts that I have. And one thing that I've learned is that credit scores fluctuate for so many different things. And it's like, it's only a snapshot of like a moment in time of how well you're paying stuff, you know, how well you're handling all the debt you have. But it doesn't tell you, your credit score doesn't tell you that you are poor, that you have debt, that you actually stress. So yeah, I don't know exactly what I was doing, but I know that I wasn't proactive about it. And I can't really say that I was like putting myself in more debt or that I was trying to get myself out. I kind of was just living with it.
No, I hear you. So let me ask you this. So if you don't mind sharing, like from the peak of how much you had, which I think you said was 108,000, how much have you paid off and over what period of time was that? Because I think that's pretty phenomenal. I think I know the numbers, but I want everybody to hear it.
Yeah, so I've paid off, I guess, like 55,000 or so. You got to account for like interest and all that stuff. But I still have about $55,000 left. So that's why I say you have to account for all that stuff. Like, So I paid off about that amount so far, and I started paying my first payments on anything was October 2017. I don't remember the last day of the month that, you know, the day that I got paid, because it could have been not the 31st. But yeah, that was the first time I made a payment on anything, and I started out paying off smaller debts that I had, which were debts to the IRS that I had owed them from that most recent tax year. So I guess the 2016 tax year. And so I had like $1,500 that I owed that, and then I had like some medical debt that were all under like $1,000. And
so
then
pause real quick. So you've been doing this, and so like you're maybe not, you're in the weeds of it, but I just want to I want to unpack just for anybody that's watching, like since October 2017, and now we're sitting, let's just call it the end of July. This is less than 2 years. So in like 18 months, you've paid off 55 grand, which is a tremendous amount. Like over and above your living expenses, you paid like almost $3 grand a month, which is like kudos to you. So like for anybody out there that's like, I can't do it, it's like, well, yes, you can, because I'm pretty sure it's way more than $3 grand to live in Atlanta. And you've been paying that, or you've been obviously paying that out along with paying off your debt. So applause to you, definitely.
Yeah.
What are some of the major takeaways when, like, so budgeting, I know you're going to say that, and I want to go over, you know, maybe what your budget is, or if you have any resources for people to use, because I know that's a big thing. You know, before your money comes in, even if you don't have any money right now, you need to kind of plan that out and where it's going to go, because to try to make the decision once you get the money is probably difficult. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit in your system.
Yeah, so definitely budgeting is a major factor in like my ability to be able to pay off that amount of debt. The other thing is increasing my income. And so I, you know, $70,000 as a postdoc. I think even just in general, like people, $70,000 is a good salary for most people. And a lot of people would just say, oh, okay, I make a good salary, I'm just going to stick with that. But I felt like it wasn't enough, like to handle a six-figure debt. Like 70,000 wasn't enough. So my mindset was like, you need to make six figures. And I didn't really know how I was going to really make six figures, so I would have to make another $30,000 on the side. But I just was like, you know, I need to find whatever way I can to increase my income. And so I started off by applying to different, you know, gig economy jobs like Instacart, and I applied for what's that one called that's like Instacart? Can't remember, but another,
Postmates?
No, well, I did actually apply for Postmates, but it's another, Shipped, another grocery delivery one. So I got approved for Postmates, and then I also got approved for Instacart. However, because when I moved, so I applied for Postmates before I even got to Atlanta, and then but I knew what my address was going to be, so I like had them send out the stuff. But when I moved here, my apartment that I was supposed to move in wasn't ready because I think the person didn't move out, so they switched me to another apartment. And so I've never gotten the Postmates stuff like till this day. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to do Postmates. I'm just going to do Instacart, since like that all worked out. I didn't get approved for Ship, so I didn't do it. But I started doing Instacart, and like I would leave work and do Instacart. Like I would come home from work at 5 and then get dressed, eat something, and be out the door by 6.
Oh, pause. All right, let me just be clear here, because I'm going to step on a lot of toes right now on purpose, because I love to polarize myself. So you're trying to tell me after all the school you had, doctorate degree in hand, you came home after your 9 to 5 and put on your gig economy clothes and went to go get your hustle on. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, that's what I did.
All right. See, so godly, there's absolutely no excuses if you want to get out of debt. Absolutely no excuses.
Yeah, right. Unfortunately, in these times, there's like so many things that you can do. If you have a car, you have an option to do so many different jobs. There's also, even if you are like, for example, if you don't have a car, if you're homebound because of a disability or whatever, there's so many like home-based jobs that you can do as well. Like, we're not living in, you know, the 90s or, you know, the 80s when these things didn't exist. Actually, Lyft and Uber and all those things didn't even exist when I was getting my doctorate. Like, if they did exist, well, I think they were starting up, but like not where I was living. They weren't around. If they were there, I probably would have utilized them, you know. And so we're in like really good times that like college students, people who have jobs, people who are disabled, anything, like literally can get a job with whatever resources they have. You don't even need an education.
Let me ask you this. What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts? I've heard this before, and I tend to agree with this. There was this notion when I was back in school, back in the Stone Ages, that you know, you couldn't go to school and work at the same time. You need to kind of concentrate on your grades. At least that's what my parents told me. But I kind of agree with you in that, you know, you might be able to do, let's call it 15, maybe even 18 hours of a course load, and especially in undergrad. And if you have a car, then go ahead and Lyft or Uber or something like that and work 20 to 30 hours a week. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I worked throughout undergrad. I also did work in my master's program and technically in my doctoral program too. So I worked, but not full time. So in undergrad, I had like paid internships, and I also worked at Urban Outfitters. I also was a after school care teacher in undergrad. And so sometimes I was working like upwards to 30 to 40 hours. In addition to, I remember like my junior year, I took like 18 credit hours and I worked, and my grades were fine. You do have to sacrifice in other areas, obviously, with social life and things like that. And so you have to think about what's really important to you. Is it important to like have friends and have like all those memories of like those drunken nights in college? Or is it more important that you stack your paper, get out of debt, or get your education or whatever? And I'm not saying that you can't have a social life, because that's not to say that I didn't go out to parties and every once in a while, but I wasn't the girl that was going out to parties Wednesday through Monday, you know? So, because I always was like, how do y'all go out to parties during the weekday? I was always confused. But, you know, I would go out on a Saturday or Friday night, and that would be it for me. And I think that's sufficient, in my opinion, for most people to be able to balance their social life while you're in college, while also working, while also doing your education. Like, my sister's in college right now, and she has a part-time job in addition to doing Grubhub and TaskRabbit and Shipt. And she's taking a full course load as well. So you have to do what's important to you, and you have to figure out if your personal finances are that important to you, or do you value something else, you know?